Welcome back to Pod Save the Youth. I'm David Seaton,
I'm Marcus and
and today we're going to be talking all about third parties. Marcus, are you ready?
Oh, yes, I am ready to talk about the amazing third-party candidates that are running out there.
Yeah. So let's start by talking about 2016. Just to go back, I hate to do it to you. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Um,
God.
but
Sorry,
let's talk
sorry.
about 2016. We have in this election Jill Stein and Gary Johnson running for president from the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, respectively. And across the map, those two candidates got a unexpectedly large amount of the vote in key states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania that are partially to blame for giving Donald Trump the presidency and giving Hillary Clinton the loss that she had in that election. Um, Particularly with Jill Stein, a small amount of progressive voters who would have traditionally voted for an Obama like candidate decided to vote third party in that election. And if you add up the Jill Stein vote to the Hillary Clinton vote in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, or even in some of those states, even just half of that vote, you get a President Hillary Clinton who may still be president today. Marcus, what's your take on that?
Um, I think it. I think this kind of highlights like the different types of perspectives that every voters have. Like, for example, in the Democratic Party, there's not just one Democrat. There's different types of Democrats. The Republican Party, there's different types of Republicans. So when members of the each party, or even as independents or libertarians or Green Party, when they see somebody that they like, but they don't go with the party that they're with, they're going to vote for those people. So I think it kind of goes back to like President Joe Biden being able to play the more moderate, get it done Democrat, and then also play the progressive, changing things Democrat. But I think it is going to be interesting to see how the if that effect that happened in 2016 is actually going to go into 2024.
Yeah, right. So in this election, once again, we do have third party candidates, and it's notable in 2020, there were two candidates on the ballot, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and Joe Biden won a massive amount of the progressive vote, of the moderate vote, and that was enough to win the presidency. Um, and there were not third party candidates on the ballot. This election, it's very different. Right now, we have RFK Jr., who's running possibly as a libertarian candidate. He's kind of waffling between between that and running just as himself. We have Cornel West, who has announced his campaign for president, but is running just by himself and currently has not gotten onto the ballot in any state. Um, and Jill Stein, our famous 2016 Green Party candidate. She's running again for the Green Party. Um, and two possible candidates could be Joe Manchin
Oh gosh.
from the state of West Virginia and Dean Phillips from Minnesota, who notably previously promised in the Democratic primary not to run third party, saying that he would support Joe Biden if he did become the Democratic nominee.
Okay. Well, those are some interesting people. I think with I think one of the most interesting ones is Robert Robert Jr. Robert F.
Robert
Jr.
Kennedy Jr., yeah.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy Jr. I think wasn't he was running as a Democrat, right? Originally when he announced he was a Democrat,
Yeah,
then he went to an
yeah,
independent, now he wants to go to a
I think so.
libertarian. I just don't
From
think he
my
can
home state
decide.
of Massachusetts.
Oh God. I don't think he can decide which party he thinks is the best for him. Which I mean, I mean, I guess you got to try new things in life, you know. But I think, I think he, I know there's talks of him going to that, but I also know there's talks of like Joe Manchin, um, actually not considering being associated with no labels
Hmm.
anymore because I think no labels was this big movement during 2020 and during 2021, and I think it's recently died out. I don't really know what the movement is of that party anymore. Do you know?
Yeah, I know that they've had some problems getting onto the ballot in a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
states. I think they're currently on the ballot in Oregon, which is I mean
Interesting.
a bit concerning, but not too concerning. Not the biggest. It won't make the biggest impact in the election. Um, but I think the thing that kind of pissed off Manchin the most was that no labels is so much associated with the Republican Party that they are going to
Yeah.
use to run any registered Democrat at the top of the ticket, even if it's Joe Manchin, as conservative as he is.
No, that's funny. But I mean, Joe Manchin is the Democratic, he's the independent savior of every issue that there is in the Senate, from, fossil fuels to climate.
What about your Kirsten Sinema friend from Arizona?
I don't know. I mean, one day I think honestly seeing them potentially run as a slate, the great Joe Manchin and the great Kirsten Sinema from West Virginia in
Certainly seems
Arizona. Which I mean, I think is a little off the topic of our conversation, but like I think the funniest thing is that she was able to broker the infrastructure bill, she was able to broker the bipartisan safer communities and bill, and then but she wasn't able to broker immigration, which is something that apparently no Republican independent or purple independent person can ever seem to broker with this Congress.
right. Yeah, I mean, they have both Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema have in recent months really invested in getting Republicans on board with an immigration deal that would do some very conservative things, like
Yeah.
possibly shut down the southern border
Yep.
and limit asylum. But apparently, for Republicans, it is too politically advantageous to Joe Biden and the Democrats to pass a bill that they have campaigned on in the past
Mm-hmm.
because they want to keep a problem at the border going in order to advance their political cause.
Which is the classic trick in the book
It's
that you do in politics.
it's very cynical, and even on Joe Manchin standards, I can't believe it.
It's funny. I know the vote happened. I think it was yesterday, as we're filming this on Thursday. It it failed. It failed with even I don't know what Democrats, but no, some Democrats. I think it was more of the progressive wing of the Senate joined Republicans to vote against it, because I know there was a lot of pushback from the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party regarding the asylum laws that would have been in place,
Right,
and
and the unconditional aid to Israel.
yeah, and to Israel, exactly. Which, this goes back to another way of that, in Congress, people don't know, Congress can throw in 10,000 things into a bill called, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act. They can throw in 10,000 things into that name. They can name whatever they want, and Congress can pass that bill. So that's what Congress does. And it's a classic trick in the book.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to talking about Kirsten Sinema for a second. So in your home state of Arizona, Kirsten Sinema is trying to decide right now whether to run as an independent candidate against Democrat Ruben Gallego and Republican Carrie Lake. And that is all before the primaries happen, but those two candidates are likely to be their party's nominees. Um, Marcus, do you think that Kirsten Sinema has the support that she would need in Arizona to win a Senate race as an independent, given that independents do comprise the largest percentage of the Arizona electorate?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's interesting. I think Kirsten Sinema has kind of effed over the Democrats and effed over the Republicans in Arizona. So she's trying to be this independent savior. But I think the most interesting thing is that she hasn't filed yet, and it's already February. And if she has to collect, I believe it is way more signatures than a Democrat and a party people have to collect in Arizona. And also, I know the last fundraising numbers just came out, and she's not raising money. right now. She's spending a lot of her money on traveling, luxurious things, living the life as as she does.
The
Um, you know,
Davos grind.
but I think I know Carrie Lake also has her own infighting going on in her party. For those who don't know, our recent chair of the Arizona Republican Party was ousted or forced to resign um, from the party leadership due to, some phone call recording that was released of him kind of pressuring, quote unquote, Carrie Lake. And then when they were selecting new party leadership on the Republican side, um, Carrie Lake got booed for like I think the first time ever I think I've ever seen Carrie Lake get booed because she played a role in trying to instrument her own takeover of the Arizona Republican Party, and people do not want that to happen because they want to select their own candidates. Um, but I think it's going to be interesting to see who pulls this off. But I don't know. It is so hard to tell. I mean, this just has never happened, in recent modern time. A Democratic senator switching over to an independent and then running in a purple state um, is something that is going to be interesting. I know as of right now, Ruben Gallego is the most top fundraiser right now in the race, and I don't know. I think a lot of people have said that a lot of political pundits in Arizona have said that Kirsten Sinema, if she runs as an independent, gets on the ballot, runs, that it'll help Carrie Lake win. That it's not really going to help Ruben Gallego. So I don't know. I'm still up in the air, but I'm on Team Ruben. So personally, so
Too. Um, yeah. Right now in Arizona, that is kind of what the polls are showing. In a race with Carrie Lake, um, she does siphon more votes off the Democratic Party than she does from Republicans,
mhm.
meaning it just lowers the threshold that Carrie Lake needs to win in this election to get a victory in this race.
No, exactly, and it's going to be interesting to see where everyone I know. Those who don't know, the Arizona Democratic Party denounced Kirsten Sinema long before she became an independent. And so, like, again, she's kind of made this self her, like, you know, corporate puppet in Arizona. It's a lot of what people see her as. She's just very, very, I'm going to do what's best for everyday Arizonans as long as they donate $1 million to my campaign and pay for my first class tickets from back from Phoenix to DC at American Airlines. So, I mean, she refuses to even talk to local reporters here in Arizona. I think the last time I saw her go on the
So
news,
weird.
huh?
That's so
Yeah,
weird.
yeah, yeah. The last time I've seen her talk to the local news outlets in Arizona was about immigration. So, and she kept it strictly about immigration.
Yeah.
She says, "I'm not going to play the political games, and Arizonans want an independent who's going to get stuff done." So, that's
Yeah.
her message.
But there are two problems to that. One, they can't get anything done. Working with Republicans on immigration is impossible right now when they want to
Yeah.
run on that issue in an election.
Yep.
And secondly, something I don't think people really understand when they talk about independence is that independents are not, they don't necessarily agree
Yeah.
on who they want at the top of the ticket just because they're registered as independents. You could be someone who, like Kirsten Sinema used to be part of the Green Party, a very progressive um,
Yeah.
person, and be part of and be an independent. And that's the same as someone who thinks the Republican Party is too left wing or too corporate. It's a very wide range of people, and you can't
Hmm.
necessarily get a person like Carrie Lake, I mean, excuse me, like Kirsten Cinema to appeal to everyone in that group, like she's saying right now. It's just it doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work. Well, she is going to do what's best for everyday Arizonans, who don't want political wars or political, dialogue. So we'll see. We'll see how far that gets her.
All right. Well,
Uh,
in 2022, just to give some more context, was there were some races where third parties did kind of help Democrats. We can see in Utah where Evan McMullen, who was an independent, uh, lost to Mike Lee by only 10 points in that state, in a state that Trump won by a much larger margin, and Romney obviously won by a larger margin before. And in the state of Oregon, I wouldn't say that their independent candidate for governor necessarily helped Democrats, but it didn't help. They didn't help Republicans in the same way that the media was kind of hyping up before the election, because they siphoned a similar amount of the Republican and Democratic vote, um, off of both candidates rather than just taking from the Democrats. Um, yeah.
No, that's really good information for our viewers to know. Um,
So
yeah,
I guess my point there is that independents don't always help Republicans, and there are some states where Democrats can't, or just are going to have a really hard time winning right now, like Utah, where running an
yeah.
independent, voting for an independent is a great idea, because
Mm-hmm.
you're voting for a candidate that can win, that you're using a vote and you're making that vote matter. Um, but in a race like the presidency, we know that a third party candidate has no chance, because I think since Bill Clinton's first election, and correct me if I'm wrong, there has not been a third party candidate that has posed a serious challenge to anyone in the presidential race. So if you are considering voting for a third party candidate, you are considering wasting your vote. And also, if you're voting for a progressive third party candidate because you're mad at Joe Biden over something, it just lowers the threshold for Donald Trump to win the election.
Yep. Well said, David. um, oh gosh, I think. Do you want to look at some of these current polls among young people
Yeah.
from the Harvard Institute?
Yeah, so the Harvard Institute of Politics did some polling around youth in this 2024 election when it comes to supporting third party candidates. And among registered young voters under 30, President Biden leads by 15 points against Trump when it's just Trump and Biden on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And then among likely voters, the lead jumps up to 24. But in a race that introduces third party candidates like Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West and Joe Manchin, Biden's lead shrinks to 8 points among youth, which would be an enormous realignment in the electorate that would almost certainly give Trump the 2024 presidential election. And again, these people are not supporting a candidate
Yeah.
that can actually win. They're supporting a candidate because they don't like the people at the top of the ticket.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to, I know we don't have the data on hand, but like I think as we break it down to like the individual states, the
Mhm.
purple states, that decided who was going to be president in 2020. I think just so viewers know, in 2022 for the governor's race in Arizona, I think it was over 76% of young voters under the age of 28 or 30 voted for Katie Hobbs to be governor of Arizona.
Wow.
So I think, yeah, and it this goes back to like what is that data in our purple states and how are young voters voting in purple states? This is the national data, but I think it's important that people consider, young voters, millennials, and Gen Z are now more than half of the voting bloc now in America, and you know, just some just some data to put out there. But it is
We can
interesting to
be half of the
see.
voting. We can be half of the voting block. We, as long as we turn out, we win.
As long as we turn out, but as long as we have candidates, that inspire us to turn out
Mhm.
and issues. So,
Yeah.
so
Um, on the same note, I want to talk about the Arizona governor's race that you just talked about. Young people are traditionally tricky to pull
yep.
because we are not voters who, especially members of Gen Z, are not necessarily voters who have voted before and are therefore not on the pollsters' radar necessarily. So in the governor's race in Arizona, consistently in 2022, Kari Lake was leading Katie Hobbs in all the polls. And on the election day, young people turned out who had not been polled, and Katie Hobbs won. What do you think about that?
Exactly. Boom. The power of Gen Z. Um, no, I 100% agree. But it's like I think this other thing is that Donald Trump and Kari Lake are really good. They're really good at rallying young people, really great at like really energizing their base.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what I've been seeing lack from the Democratic Party recently is that where is the issues? Where are the things that really are going to mobilize us to turn out, be energized, be ready to vote for President Biden and all of these Ruben Gallego in Arizona and just anywhere in the country? Where is that from our party, and where is that from leadership and from our candidates? And I think
Yeah.
this is just something that I haven't seen personally happen yet. Yet, yeah, we still have time to go. But yeah, what's your experience and
I
your take on like
I'll say
parties engaging with
I'll say
people?
one thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think Republicans have an easier time right now motivating young people to vote because they do not have to run on a governing record, right?
Yeah.
They're both for two reasons. Right now, they're not in office, or at least
Mhm.
not in the presidency, and also their party is fundamentally against government.
Mhm.
So if they don't deliver much, like the current Republican caucus and Congress is doing, young people will not care who are voting for Republicans because they are not voting to get policies done. They are
Mhm.
voting to kind of own the libs, I would say,
On
to
the libs.
from God Save America.
On the
On the
libs.
other side, right now, young people who are considering voting for Democrats, who are maybe progressively or independently minded, are making their decision in large part around whether Joe Biden reflects their personal beliefs of what policies they want to advance in our country. And right now, we know I know we talked about this 2 weeks ago on our episode in the panel discussion, but Democrats are losing a massive amount of ground with young people
Yep.
on the issue of the war in Gaza because young people who are voting for Democrats or who would vote for Democrats care about international affairs.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if you're a Republican, you don't have to deal with that um, sentiment within young people who are considering voting for you because their only agenda is to own the libs and be mad at Democrats.
I think no, that's a really good point. I think another thing to note is that like I was recently looking at that like more younger men are trending to be more conservative, but women are on a skyrocket. Younger women are on a skyrocket to be more progressive and liberal in their views. And I think that's actually, as we talk about, the famous suburban women, will you vote for me from Donald Trump? Um, or no, suburban women, will you love me? As we see more of those people get older, I think as we see them also get more liberal, it's going to be interesting to see how that vote plays out now among women, because this is just moved from LGBTQ plus people to women as we see Generation Z and Generation Alpha, upcoming generation. Um, we are seeing them have less rights than their great grandparents had in the 50s and 60s and 40s and 50s. The silent generation and the boomers, we have less rights than they had at the time, which is very, never thought I'd ever grow up saying that, that I had less rights than my parents had. But it's gonna be interesting to see. I think I think politics is a. It's just gonna be a very interesting year. It's gonna be a very interesting year, and I think,
And
uh,
and to your point,
yeah.
right now, young people who are again considering voting for Democrats are disillusioned with the party in large
Hmm.
part, and young people who are considering voting for Republicans are energized because they want to get Donald Trump back in office. But something I kind of picked up on in the focus group conversation that I had last week was that although young people are kind of sour um, on Joe Biden, and most of the young people in the focus group were said they were independents, which is kind of what we're talking about today.
Hmm.
Abortion rights were an incredibly motivating issue.
Hmm.
As you said, people, our young generation is absolutely mad, as we should be, that
Hmm.
we have less rights than generations before us, than the generation that raised us.
Yeah.
Uh, and we're not going to accept that. We view the overturning of Roe as a fundamentally um, damaging part of our lives and an incredibly informative part of our political um, our political shaping as a generation. Um, yeah, and we also view the threats to democracy uh, in a very acute way because we see that if we lack the right to hold our elected officials accountable through voting rights, through a lack of voting rights, we are not able to advance the policies that we need in terms of climate justice, in terms of any action on a ceasefire in Gaza, and in terms of just making sure that our voices are heard.
Yeah. No. On that note, um, that's a perfect way to end the show. um, we are not going to let our rights be taken away from us, and we are going to organize, strategize, and we will do whatever we can, prop up candidates, prop up our own generation to be in these offices so that stuff like that can never happen again. So, yeah, agreed.
Yeah. In just the last few minutes that we have here today, what is your pitch to young people who are considering voting for a third party right now?
We live in a democracy, and anyone has the right to vote whoever they want. But um, vote for the candidates that you believe will fight the best for you in any office, but also know that President Biden has a track record of getting stuff done. And he has passed some of the most comprehensive, most progressive legislation that the country's ever seen since FDR and Truman. So, I mean, I'm not telling people who to vote for or who not to vote for, but as long as you don't vote for Trump, you're fine. No, go ahead.
Well, I'll make my pitch now. Um,
Yeah, big
you're never gonna find a politician that you agree with 100% of the time
Yeah.
unless you run yourself, which you absolutely should.
Hmm.
Um, but in the meantime, in most elections, we have to make a choice between the best of two evils, or even just the best of two choices that it might not be evil, but just aren't what we would prefer. And for a lot of young people, that's what this election represents. So I'll just say, over the course of the Biden administration, there have been policies that have made me incredibly angry. The Willow Project,
Yep.
the um, the war in Gaza right now, and the lack
Hmm.
of a ceasefire call from the administration.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Joe Biden was the person responsible for passing, along with Kirsten Sinema, the
Yep.
IRA, the Inflation
Hmm.
Reduction Act, which will cut uh, excuse me, fossil fuel emissions by 40% in the next few years. He created the Civilian Climate Corps, revitalizing our climate workforce. And he just recently freezed liquefied natural gas exports in the country, a major step in getting our nation and the world at large off of our reliance on fossil fuels. So I see this election as a choice between two options that I would not have liked if given a choice, but it's a choice that I don't have.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm not going to let my voice be silenced because I have two candidates that I wouldn't exactly prefer. So I'm going to vote, and I'm going to put my vote where it matters towards a party that I know will win if our generation turns out.
If our generation turns out. And on that note,
On that note, I'm David Seaton.
I'm Marcus and Aceros.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pod Save the Youth.
Take care, y'all.